All right, everybody. Thanks again for being here at Football Fridays at the Eck. Our next guest on Catching Up With is a member of the class of 2012. He was a starting offensive guard on the great Notre Dame 2012 team, and he is the host of his own national radio show on ESPN Radio. Please welcome Mike Golic Jr. Thanks for being here, Mike.
Thanks for having me. Good to be back.
Yeah, it's great to have you back on campus. Mike, you were obviously born into a Notre Dame family. Your dad and your uncles went here, played here. Your mom went to St. Mary's. From a young age, when you were a young kid, was it your expectation all along? I'm going to go to Notre Dame. I'm going to play football there.
I like to give mom and dad credit and say it was good parenting and it was brainwashing from an early age because I grew up, I got to high school, you start getting recruited and everything, and I'd come to 2 Notre Dame games every year from the time I was in 3rd grade. Always been around the school. I think I was swaddled in blue and gold. And so by the time you get to high school and get ready and get started recruiting, Dad sits me and my brother down and gives us the speech. You can go anywhere you want. This is your choice. We don't want you to feel obligated to go here because I went here, because your mom went to St. Mary's, because both your uncles went here, because your Aunt Tracy went to St. Mary's. None of this stuff. And so by then, he had already made the decision for us through years of great parenting. So a lesson to everyone who's in the crowd right now, that brainwashing is possible and it does work.
So you didn't consider any other schools when the offers started coming in?
No, and it was one of those things you didn't want to take for granted that an offer would come from a great school like this. And so you go around and, I took visits to other schools and talked to a lot of coaches and went through the process, ultimately knowing that if and when this offer ever came, this was the place that I wanted to be. And through the recruiting process, I had already gotten to meet guys that I was potentially going to be classmates with and had started to form that bond and see, all right, not only is this a place that I grew up loving, but there's a lot of guys that are getting ready and looking here that are really a lot like me in a lot of the ways that I valued.
Was it intimidating at all, coming to Notre Dame as a football player with the last name Golic? Your dad was a star here. Your Uncle Bob is one of the best defensive players of all time in Notre Dame. Was that at all, difficult for you and Jake kind of having to come in with such big expectations, not just because you were so successful in high school, but also because of your last name?
I think it was a nice challenge, and it made for a welcoming environment. Like, this has always been a place that had felt like family because we had grown up around it. And so for people to see the last name and automatically be really accepting of us on campus and really helpful was a great thing and another great feather in the cap of a place that truly is still family for us to this day. But coming on campus, it's another challenge for you to try and add to that legacy, to try and look at what the others had accomplished and say, all right, now it's on me to go out there and make sure that I take this great baseline, this great legacy that they left behind and try and add to it as best I can.
Well, you definitely added to the legacy. You're starting your sophomore year. You were really a regular contributor, and then you eventually became a starter at offensive guard, and were one of the 5 guys on that great offensive line on the tremendous 2012 team that had the undefeated season. What was it about that offensive line that was so effective?
I think it was cohesiveness, and Harry Hiestand, who's still the offensive line coach here now, and the guy who was my coach in that last season, always talked to us about seeing everything through one set of eyes. And I think we had a group of guys, between myself, Christian Lombard, Braxton Cave, who had been my roommate all through college, Zach Martin and Chris Watt, who were both roommates, who were guys that we had been close with. You had such a bond with these guys outside of the locker room. We did a lot of other things together. And I think just that ability to kind of constantly be communicating, to sometimes be able to communicate without having to say anything, all really helped that group go out there and use a lot of that veteran leadership quality to help not only our group operate the best that they could, but make sure that we were a place that the team could look at and say, all right, those guys are ones we can count on. That's a group that we know is going to be there for us.
David Deal, who was an offensive lineman, played for the Giants on those Super Bowl teams a few years back. I saw recently he said that Harry Hiestand is, everyone in the NFL knows he's the best offensive line coach in college. You're an analyst now too, but you also had the benefit of playing for him. How special of a coach is our offensive line coach?
I kind of tell everyone every time I'm asked about Harry that if you gave me an hour to wax poetic about Harry Hiestand, it probably still wouldn't be enough. I'm waiting for someone to give me an offer to write the book on Coach Hiestand because he really is a guy that has changed a lot of guys' lives. And I've had the chance to talk to Dave about his time with him at Illinois, but you hear about guys that have come back. We were fortunate to meet Olin Kreutz and some of the guys who he coached with the Chicago Bears, and they all kind of say the same thing. And you understand with Harry that there's such an uncompromising standard that he is going to hold up because he has a ton of pride in what it means to be a Notre Dame offensive lineman, what it means to coach that position. And he instills that pride in the group, and he's so giving to you of everything. And all he asks in return is that you do the same thing, that you give to him everything you've got. And I was a guy that Harry had for one season. I went out, busted my butt to be a great player for him. And on the back end, as I bounced around and tried out, and tried to make NFL rosters, he was the first one helping me beat down doors, talking to coaches that he knew. And I really try and express that to guys. Like, if you just go out there and do what he asks of you, which is the right thing across the board. He coaches offensive line the way it's supposed to be coached. If you do those things that he's asking of you now, on the back end, you're going to have someone who's loyal to you and with you for the rest of your life, no matter what you choose to do.
You mentioned Zach Martin a few minutes ago when you were talking about the 2012 offensive line. You played with him for a number of years here. He obviously walked into the NFL as a Pro Bowler, has just, established himself as one of the best guards in the NFL. Are you surprised at all at, we knew he was a great player here at Notre Dame, but just at how dominant and successful he's been in the professional league?
No. If anything, those of us that knew Zach and saw him practice every day were insulted. Every tackle or offensive lineman I saw go off the board before him, I just looked at with utter disbelief. And Mike Mayock, who was calling our games back then, who was an analyst at the NFL Network, I'm sitting there listening to Mike talk about Zach going through the combine and the process, like, Mike, how are you not letting people in on this secret that we all already knew? I mean, we used to call Zach the Warden because in one-on-ones in practice, every single day we'd line up there, and whether it was Stephon Tuitt or Capron Lewis-Moore, or on and on down the list of guys that were NFL-caliber pass rushers, Zach would just promptly escort them past the quarterback spot and never even hint at giving up a pressure. So that was what's happened with Zach is exactly what we've expected. And it's nice because for some reason, being the starting left tackle at Notre Dame didn't seem to get him the recognition that he deserved. He's an unbelievable kid. He's one that's never going to sing his own praises, and that's a credit to his family. His mom and dad, Pam and Keith, are incredible. His younger brother, Nick, is much in the same mold. Nick's going to play in the NFL for a decade and be a great starter for the Texans. But Zach was special any way you cut it, and we all kind of realized that early on, that you're probably watching the best football player any of us were going to play with.
Wow, you and Zach were two of the leaders of that great 2012 team. For us Notre Dame fans, there were so many special moments watching that undefeated regular season, so many dramatic victories. When you look back on it, is there a moment or a game that is most special for you?
I think going down to Oklahoma, obviously you get used to a lot of great road environments playing around here, and was always partial to going out to Michigan State. I thought East Lansing was always a great road environment, a place you always knew you were in for a tough game. But a program like Oklahoma, where Bob Stoops had, I think at that time, only lost 5 home games in his tenure, you knew prided themselves on that as a program. To go down there and not only beat them, but to physically beat them as soundly as we did, and to kind of, I think, get that recognition as we searched for, the Notre Dame relevant question that always came up over and over again that season, to kind of put a stamp on that one and say, all right, no, we're going to be here. This is who we are at a place as storied as Norman, Oklahoma was one that we all kind of still, every once in a while, an honest moment will admit was one of the more special experiences that we had.
You also had a great win at the end of the regular season, with all the pressure on you. You win and you're in the national championship game when you went out and played the opponent that the Irish have got this weekend, Southern Cal. And that was a game where the offensive line and Theo Riddick really established, exerted their will against, the defense too. Is it extra special for you as a player, especially one who grew up loving Notre Dame and Notre Dame football, when you beat USC?
Yeah, and this is an honest to God, a very real conversation I remember having with my dad in the hotel. We were out at Southern Cal. It was the night before. And we were getting ready to play, and at that point we knew where we stood, that this was going to be a de facto playing game. You win this game, you're going to be 12-0 and playing in the national title. You're going to get a chance to try and do all these things we wanted to do for Notre Dame. But I looked there and sat at my dad and said, I know and understand all this, and yet for some reason I can't just get past the fact that we get the chance to beat Southern Cal tomorrow. And I said to him, that's what you sign up for when you come here. There's a couple of teams on the schedule, you'd say probably Michigan and Southern Cal, that when you sign on the dotted line and you sign that national letter of intent, you come here to beat those teams. And so just to go out there on a road environment with the team that we had battled back and forth with during my time here and be able to get a win in that kind of fashion was incredible. And the celebration in the locker room after was just as much for, man, we just took it to Southern Cal. We got the Shillelagh back on their turf. And, oh, by the way, we get to go play in the title after. So it really was something that exists all on its own.
The season, while it was such a tremendous and enjoyable one, obviously ended in disappointment, losing the national championship game. That's, it's hard for fans to get that close to a national championship and see it slip away, but it must be so much harder for players. How difficult was it to get over that loss for you and your teammates?
It was hard because, again, going back to the talk of being a legacy kid at this school and really understanding what this place is all about, you understand that as one person, you have very few chances to give back meaningfully to a place that gives you a lot and has given my family a lot over the years and is so special to so many people. And so I looked at that as, all right, this is this service you can do for this place. This is something you can give this school, this fan base, this family that lasts forever. And so that's the painful part of it, is understanding you were very close to that. And as time goes on, you go back and you're able to appreciate some of the better moments from that season, but there will always be part of that stings. And that's why I'm with everyone else where I get so excited seeing the team start to perform the way they do this year, because you want that for this place. This is a place that deserves that kind of success and deserves that kind of gift from the guys that are going out there every Saturday.
Well, you were part of such a special group on that 2012 team. You were also part of a smaller special group during your time here on campus. You were one of the founding members of the crew that started the Trickshot Monday tradition. I'm sure a lot of people in the stands here watching are familiar with Trickshot Monday, but for those who aren't, can you tell us what Trickshot Monday was and how it began?
Trickshot Monday was a way to pass the time. So every Monday coming off the weekend, we had a break in between what was our morning schedule. We'd go back through, we'd break down the tape from the weekend's game that had just taken place. We'd go through that, and then we'd have time to shower up. There was a meal, and then we would get on. We would close the book on that, and we would turn the page and start getting ready for whoever the opponent was the following week. But we had an odd amount of time in there where you couldn't really leave. You couldn't really do anything else. And so one day we just kind of filled a cup up with water, found a ping pong ball, and a handful of us decided, all right, let's figure out how we can just kill time, kind of like kids do, just bouncing around and seeing what we can make happen. And then somewhere along the line, someone decided to videotape it, and someone decided to post it online. And then it had really kind of been a cult following. It had been a small thing all the way up until my younger brother makes the shot heard around the world that ends up at number 2 on SportsCenter's top 10. And after that, it was kind of hard to keep it a secret. So the great part was we were doing that all on like our camera phones, and we're taping it to the wall and doing all this ridiculous stuff. I come back 2 years later, and Joe Schmidt and those guys who did a great job of keeping the tradition going for a while, they've got like the HBO Showtime cameras in there, the production value's off the charts. They've got graphics and imaging for it. I'm like, okay, all right, I see how this goes now. We leave and do a little bit of winning, and all of a sudden these guys get to reap the benefits, which is what you want. I wasn't bitter about it at all. But anyway, no, it's something that we couldn't ever fathom would become what it did when we first started doing it. But it's a credit to our fans that are always supportive of whatever we choose to do, even if it's something as simple as just throwing a ping pong ball into a cup of water.
Well, you mentioned your brother Jake hitting the shot heard around the world. There were a lot of for fans who were following it every week, a lot of great shots. But I'm going to put you on the spot. Who was the best shooter in Trickshot Monday history?
The best shooter in Trickshot Monday history. You know what I actually have to say is he came slightly after my time. He was the prince that was promised. Torii Hunter Jr. was the child prodigy of sorts, because I remember he burst onto the scene as a freshman. I think he had 2 or 3 makes that year, and we all started to realize back on campus, like, forget what was going on in the field. You had something special brewing in this talent pool there. So I was very excited. Obviously, Torii has graduated to a different kind of ball down the road, went the baseball route, is a father now, all those great things. But I like to think that we instilled a lot of those values in him, cultivating him as a Trickshot Monday prodigy.
One of the great things about those videos was you got to, as a fan, kind of experience the camaraderie of the team and see some personality from the players and see how much you guys enjoyed each other as teammates. Are you still, pretty close with a lot of those guys that you went to school with here and played with for 5 years?
Oh yeah, we had the 5-year reunion not too long ago, so I saw a lot of those guys there. Through the joys of modern technology, I've got a group chat about 10 guys deep all from that team, all guys from our recruiting class at Notre Dame who we still talk to this day. And I mean, now it's gone from, ping pong balls and rides home after games and those long plane rides on the road to 7 or 8 weddings in the last 2 years. We've got a bunch of babies that are already here right now, so I get to do my fake uncle duties at this point. So the game has changed decidedly, but it's still fun, and this is a place where you bond together, and then you don't really ever leave each other. And I think having that network of guys has made everything that we've all faced after college and life after football a lot easier on everyone, knowing, all right, you've got this built-in group of guys that you can rely on forever now.
You, after you graduated from Notre Dame, you pursued the NFL for a little while, but you've now, at such a young age, launched such a successful radio career where you host your own national radio show. At what point did you start to think, I think I could have a future in broadcasting?
It was here. I mean, I was a film and television major on campus here, and because of the football program and Mike Birch and a lot of those guys over, and not only that worked with our media department, but the digital media crew as well, they were kind enough to let myself, Brandon Newman, who works at Fox Sports 1 now, who's a defensive tackle for us, get in front of the microphone and kind of take fans behind the scenes. So in addition to Trickshot Monday, we had a lot of other behind-the-scenes videos during our time here that really kind of started to scratch the itch for me, where it's okay, I kind of like this. You get to entertain, you get to bring people where they might not otherwise be able to go, and being able to parlay that into a career now. I always said, as a kid who naturally kind of never shut up, if I could trick someone into paying me to talk for a living, I might do all right with this. And having the blueprint with Dad sitting in front of me has made the transition a lot easier.
Well, you're doing pretty well. You host your own show, First and Last, on ESPN Radio. It's a national show. It starts at 4 in the morning, I believe, Eastern, where you are. How difficult is it for you? You have to get up that early, but you also have to be able to talk about the games that took place the night before that are ending sometimes, I'm sure, at 1 in the morning.
Yeah, I am armed with youth and caffeine, and right now that's good enough. I don't know how long that's going to last me, but right now it's good enough. And you learn very quickly that you're going to have to alter your schedule a lot because you want to be up to watch a lot of the games, obviously for work, but also just as a fan of sports. Like, you don't want to miss the NBA playoffs, Major League Baseball playoffs going on right now when we get to the NFL on down the road. And so you learn to operate without very much sleep. You learn to become an expert napper, which I can also thank college for getting me very used to. I did a lot of that right over in Siegfried Hall not too long ago. So I think that skill set is still getting put to work to this day. But it's like anything else. I mean, how fortunate am I that that's my job, is I have to stay up to date on all the things that I would probably love to watch anyway, and then get to talk about them the next morning, and have a lot of people that, despite it being 4 in the morning, are up and engaged and really active interacting with the show. And I consider myself really fortunate to have all of them around as well. It makes it a lot of fun.
You're adding a new show coming up soon to your resume, the Golic and Wingo show. It's going to be, your dad and Trey Wingo and you. How exciting is it going to be for you? You've been on Mike and Mike with him a lot, obviously, but to, every day be working alongside your dad on a sports radio show.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It's still one of those things that we look around and at times struggle to really comprehend. And we knew it was a possibility when I started off at ESPN, just because we had the overlap. We had a chance to do a couple of things together. We called a college football game together last December, the Pinstripe Bowl in New York City. We're getting ready to call another one together. Navy and Temple are playing in Philadelphia in a couple of weeks, so we'll be doing that as well. But just to have that opportunity where, for me, getting into this, it's still a new field despite how much I was used to dealing with the media. And so to have your dad there as the guy to sort of create that comfort level to where I'm on set with him, and this is the guy that I've been, busting his chops and trying to get in these debates with at home on the couch for 28 years now. So that just settles you down in a way that I know most other people don't get the opportunity to, despite who their mentor is, because it's just impossible to replicate that comfort level. And so I'm extremely fortunate for him. Now he's going to have to deal with me taking all of the ribbing I've done for him at home onto national TV, and people are going to see how much smarter I am than him. But other than revealing that to the world, he's very excited about it.
You obviously primarily cover sports on your show, but you do a lot more than that, and you like to talk about other fun subjects. This morning, I know you were talking about your passion for Waffle House on the air. How do you approach, a radio show? What's your style in terms of, broadening it and not making it just about the nitty-gritty of the games?
Yeah, I think at times, and sometimes this is a bad job that we do in the world of sports, we get so lost inside what we do that we forget that the people who are listening are just like us, and their interests are varied. And a lot of people, especially, the people that have, whether it's been following me on Twitter or have gotten to know me over the years, know that food's a big part of our lives, that, television and movies are a big part of our lives. And that's the kind of stuff that I always tell myself, if I'm having fun talking about it on air and if I can make the people working in our little room laugh, usually we end up getting a response where other people are kind of enjoying it with us. And that's the beauty, is sports relates well to a lot of those things. I mean, the article I was referencing was talking about how fans of Auburn and Georgia and these teams down south all would flock to Waffle Houses pre-game. And, it's just like going to Between the Buns or whatever they call it now, unfortunately. I still abide by the old standard and call it Between the Buns. But going to all the local watering holes around here, like all these things are so closely tied in with sports that it's just fun to kind of expand that, because what's all that appealing about it just being lockdown sports all the time? Life's too short and there's too much other good stuff going on. I mean, we see it here on campus every day, so just try to bring a little bit of that to the airwaves.
Before we go to questions from the audience, Mike, you're a sports analyst, and I know you pay very close attention to the Notre Dame football team, so we got to get your insight on this year's team. How impressed have you been with the way that the team has responded after the tough, close loss to Georgia in week 2?
Yeah, those are always turning point moments, and we saw last weekend in college football how if you don't respond well to those turning point moments in the season, those games where you walk in and expect to win, if you're not constantly prepared, someone's going to be waiting there and ready to get you. And we saw whether it was Clemson, Washington State all last weekend falling victim to that. At Notre Dame, you get used to that being every week. Every team that comes out here, regardless of if they're our toughest rival or if they're a team playing for the first time, is treating this like a bowl game. And so you learn to ratchet up your intensity every single time. And I think that's what this team has done a good job of embracing so far. And they've had all the, the energy surrounding the new stadium being open and the board and all the locker rooms being redone, changes in the coaching staff. And it can be easy to let those things be things that detract you away from what your focus is. But they've stayed into that. Brandon Wimbush, your young quarterback, has been locked in and getting better along the way. Glad that he's healthy and back for this game. And, again, kind of like we were, having an offensive line that now has a lot of experience, brought a lot of guys back from the last couple of years, for this group to be able to rely on is huge. And so far, they've shown they're willing and able to shoulder that load.
USC is obviously an extremely talented team coming in here tomorrow night. For them, it's a huge rivalry game as well, and they're wanting to show on the national stage with two highly ranked teams. When you look forward and you're thinking about tomorrow night, is there a key matchup that you're looking at, one line versus the other, or one unit against another that you think is going to determine the outcome of tomorrow night's game?
Yeah, I mean, obviously for me, it's always going to come down to the lines. So I look at the lines of scrimmage, but I look at more so on the other side with our defensive line. Can Dalen Hayes, can Jay, can Julian Aquara and those guys get pressure on Sam Darnold, the guy who came into the season with a world of expectation on his shoulders and has shown that he is human. He is a guy that only started 10 games through the course of last year before all this hype got surrounding him. And so can those guys get him off that spot and rattle him a little bit? And then this secondary that had to grow up a lot fast last year, Drew Tranquil and that bunch, can they go out there and do their part, can lock down on the back end, knowing that this group up front is going to do their darndest to try and generate some pressure? And I think based on what we've seen so far this season, that's a group that's up to the task, that's going to take the ball away at some point tonight and then let our offense capitalize and do enough to win.
So what's your official game prediction? What's the score going to be tomorrow night?
Official game prediction. I think we're going to put some points up on the board. I think it'll be a close one. I think we'll come down 31-28, but we're gonna edge this one out. Nice dramatic fashion.
All right, we'll take it. All right, we're going to open it up to some questions from the audience for Mike Golic Jr. now. Raise your hand if you got a question for Mike. Don't be shy. Got one right here.
Mike, back to 2012 championship game. In truth, was Alabama that much better, or did Notre Dame have a lousy game?
I will always maintain, and think since I'm among friends here, I think I can say this and actually get more people to believe me. I really don't think the gap was that wide. I think you saw us play our worst game of the season, unfortunately, at the worst possible time that we could, and especially seeing that out of our defense that had been such a stellar unit the entire year, that had really been the backbone of a solid team. To see them struggle that day, I can't imagine was emblematic of who they really were. And, I think if we played that game 10 more times, it would look a lot differently each of those times. But you only get one chance, and give Alabama all the credit in the world. I've met a lot of those guys on that team after, and the first thing I do is give them credit for a hell of a win and ask them promptly to return my national championship ring.
Got a question over here.
I'm just speaking as a mom. What was dinner like for your mother with you, your uncles, your dad talking? What are the people who don't talk to?
You know what? You'd be surprised at home. We actually are a little more deferential to Mom. And you always hear the stock line that Mom's the star of the show, but she really is the one that holds court at home. And we're all smart enough to shut up and listen when she talks, because she's also the one providing the food. So if we get a little too out of turn, we understand that it could be less than we're accustomed to, and our bunch is a hungry bunch, doesn't benefit anyone. There's a lot of fighting and wrestling that goes on then, and no one really wins. A lot gets broken.
More questions for Mike? Raise your hand if you got a question.
I don't have a question, but you did good on Matt Berry's fantasy show this week.
Thank you. Appreciate it. A lot of fun. A lot of puppets on that show, oddly enough, which is interesting. Matthew Berry's a great guy. He was kind enough to let me borrow his puppets for the week.
There you go. Got one over here.
Hi, Mike. I want to know what's the best meal you've ever had, and where did you have it?
The best meal I've ever had. Well, around here especially, so on Thursdays when I was in school, and this tradition started when I got on campus as a freshman, we would go to, why am I blanking on the, we would go to Antonio's, actually, which is a restaurant over in Elkhart, a little ways out, with, myself, Braxton Cave, Kyle Rudolph, the guys that I roomed with there. And it was a great Italian restaurant. It was a little further distance away, but we got to know Paul, the owner there, pretty well, and he always did a good job of feeding us to the brim. So anytime we knew we needed to gain weight in the off-season or had that directive, we knew that chicken parm and pasta was probably going to be the way to do it, or the Italian stallion pizza that they were well known for over there. So Antonio's was always very kind to us out here.
All right, we got a question from Dolly Duffy, the executive director of the Alumni Association.
So, Mike, when your dad was here last year, and just remind your dad that he's not here this year and you are, and now we have to compare the two and see who gets the next invitation. But you guys, you and Sydney and I don't know who else was here, and you asked your dad, for once and for all, tell us, who's your favorite child? So now that your mom's here, and she's pretty amazing, who's your mom's favorite child?
Listen, I like to think the easy answer for both of them is me. I mean, however you want to stack this up, I feel like I've got the other two beat at this point. My sister spends a lot more of my dad's money at this point, so I've got that edged out on her. My younger brother was a little bit of a bigger headache in high school for Mom, so I feel like I've stacked up enough goodwill across the board. And all joking aside on that one, my brother and sister are absolute rock stars and both infinitely funnier than I am, but I think I've just done a better job of sucking up to Mom and Dad throughout the years.
All right, Mike, we are out of time for questions. Mike Golic Jr., thanks so much for being here.